I love this show. This anime is everything I could want, with the setting telling a story of its own, and the music entrancing me with its ethereal vibes. However, with the show basically confirmed over, as by the finale, it's time to get into the problems I have. Don't get me wrong, I adore the animation and story, especially the message presented in the end, although they could have changed the still frames for greater effect. No, that's not what caught my critical eye. I can accept the decisions made in regards to those categories when relating to improving the story, yet the show managed to throw me off with one of their recurring characters. Who is she? Insert Dahlia Des reference here. For better context, she is, spoilers for the people who haven't seen the show yet, Angela's mother. Well, adopted mother. She is also her manager in a sense, since she is the driving force behind Angela's careers, both in modeling and music. Warning to those who haven't watched the entirety of Carole Tuesday. This video essay contains spoilers for major plot points regarding Dahlia's involvement. Also, I'm gonna say a lot of the names in the sort of Japanese style. I'm not fluent in Japanese, I don't even speak it. I just prefer to say it in the Japanese style because me and my friends have a lot of arguments about whether or not we should say it in the dub style or the sub style. Let's give some more context to the story and where I get angry. Dahlia lives in Alba City, where the core of the show takes place. She is introduced as the mother to Angela after she fires another manager. The main reason given by Dahlia for why her daughter needs to change careers is that her own path as a child actor failed to last once she grew up. This is a crucial part of her character motivations, so keep an eye on that. The majority of scenes that include her are in regards to Angela's career, as well as her parental relationship. Other than that, we, the audience, see her as a rival of Gus, CNT's manager. By the way, CNT means Carole Tuesday. With that bit of context, let me evaluate what ticks me off with the way that they wrote her character. I am a transgender woman of the age of 18. While currently transitioning, the show presented itself unto me for judgment. And while my hormones do make me spontaneously cry in terrible situations, basically in public, they were not influencing my judgment when I first saw this show back in December. You see, transgender characters are extremely rare to come by in television and popular media, let alone animation. So to see a full-on transgender character in an anime set in the future where a multitude of other queer characters also exist was a spark of joy in my dull life. And yet, they still led me to resent Dahlia's existence. You see, it's not merely enough to give me a plain cut-and-paste gay bottom and expect me not to criticize the stereotype. I need depth in a character in order for me to either relate to them or to better understand them. In that regard, the anime does somewhat well. They try harder to develop Carole Tuesday's friendship in the latter half of the first volume and the second volume in certain episodes. They fully establish Gus's past and what led to him becoming what he is in the 20th episode. As for the background characters, they have minimal character development as they aren't necessary to the backbone of the story, and even then the show still manages to give each individual some form of style and characteristics. I feel as though the only way they fail to do so is in the still frames that merely show people in one of three emotions: calm yet happy, ecstatic, or confused. However, they made one mistake that truly grabs me by the tits: Dahlia's past. Now, if you're new to the show, watch the latter half of the first volume. It will reveal a secret that changes the way we see the mother-daughter bond between Angela and Dahlia. Not even 5 episodes into the barely 12-episode-long first volume, and we can clearly see that in the canon of the show, Angela felt uncomfortable around her adoptive mother due to an abusive past. The show reasons that this abusive and violent behavior is due directly to Dahlia's past while initially starting hormone therapy. Now, there is nothing wrong with having a story arc that revolves around past trauma and overcoming that. I was actually impressed as to how the show treated Angela's arc in the second volume of the show. They successfully treated her story arc about finding herself amidst all the chaos with dignity and respect. Her arc about her relationship to her adoptive/abusive mother is good, and I find it a distinguishable piece of show writing that handles the rocky relationship between the two well. But that's not where I get pissed. No, my anger is a direct result of the reasoning to the abusive behavior. The audacity to state in the canon of the show that hormone replacement therapy, an integral part of millions of trans people's transition, is the reason why Dahlia in the show abused her adopted child is one of the worst choices ever made by any show producer in the history of the entire entertainment industry. There's no problem with showing the audience an abusive member of the LGBTQ+ community, because they do indeed exist. I actually find it important to understand that just because we, the people of the spectrum, grow to realize that we love dick or want tits, that it doesn't make us any less capable of abusive or toxic behavior. As modern media currently stands, most every depiction of any segment of the LGBTQ+ community typically shows us as docile compared to the homophobes/transphobes that outwardly waste their time by shooting their anger towards us, both figuratively and literally. That is to say, the media in which we are represented generally ignore the darker parts of the spectrum, such as abusive relationships in gay or lesbian relationships, or internalized transphobia that comes from almost half of the sexual spectrum, especially significant sections of the gay community, surprisingly. So on that front, I have no objection. I find it despicable, however, to state that the hormones are the reason as to why Dahlia chose to abuse her daughter. Because let me tell you, I am a currently transitioning transgender woman who is, by the time of this script, April 30th, 2020, honey, going on 4 months of hormones. And as a trans woman taking hormones, let me tell you that there is no reason to blame hormones for abusive behavior. Because if you even Google it for 1 second, most every source you can find argues and agrees that abusive behavior is a result of the abuser's past and their choices as to how they deal with relationships in general. There is a reason why abuse is not the fault of the abused. It's the fault of the abuser and their choices. And don't you dare fucking say, well, it was Dahlia's choice to take hormones, therefore it counts. Unless you get your information about HRT from conservative news networks and scientists, then you'd know that hormone replacement therapy has some minor emotional effects, those of which do not include the rage to beat up your adopted daughter. Most of them are an increase in health risks. For example, one of my risks is the fact that I could develop a tumor in my brain that would present itself as nipple lactation. There are minor to major changes in behavior depending on how large your dosage may be. For me, those changes have so far included the eventual crying in the middle of nowhere, where I would never have cried over anything. Maybe that was to do with the sociological expectations of men in showing emotion, but let's just say, once I took hormones for only a month, tears started to fall more often than they used to. Now all this is to affirm that abuse is not an effect from hormone therapy, as most studies show that the changes in behavior of people taking hormones are truly tiny when compared to the other physical effects of the hormones. As previously stated with my personal example of health risk, with male to female transition, it is most definite that you will develop breast tissue over time. As is true with female to male transition, which will grow more body hair and deepen voices. My point being that Carole Tuesday should not be praised for its representation of LGBTQ+ people, especially Dahlia, who is an offense to all transgender people across the world, especially those in Japan and Asia. Because here in the US, CNT isn't really acknowledged as a popular anime. I feel as though Dahlia will be the first example of a transgender character in anime in Asia for a lot of people, which will lead to an internalized stereotype where the trans woman is not a suitable parent because she's on hormones, which will lead to even more unjustified discrimination towards Japanese and other Asian transgender women across the world because a person who watched this anime decided that the fictionalized idea that abusive behavior comes from hormones is in fact a real thing and will never question it. That's not even getting into the lackluster development of LGBTQ+ characters in the show. Sure, they have Marie, a past friend and ex of Gus, who proudly kisses her fiancé in front of the audience as well as CNT, while also telling Gus about it, but even with those positive points, she is still relegated to the background of the show's vibrant cast. She, along with the presumably gay host on Mars Brightest, and Desmond, appear to be a sort of one-time cameo, while the other less interesting straight/cis characters get more screen time and better plots. That isn't to try and degrade the normalized stereotype of representation the show is going for. I'm all for normalizing queer culture to the audience by not trying to heavily emphasize the fact that they are gay or queer by excessively using gay stereotypes and instead featuring them as normal parts of society. It would honestly have been a worse decision to relegate the queer characters as an anomaly on Mars in the future. That would have sinister intentions to the meaning of that. However, I, and I'm sure many other LGBTQ+ anime fans, am still not quenched with the countable amount of LGBTQ+ characters, meaning I can count them on my hands. Also, can we talk about the weird attempt at humor by ridding Angela of her personal freedom as a woman? For fuck's sake, this poor girl doesn't have a loving mother, much less a family unless CNT show up, and then they just and episode 5 of season 2/volume 2, with the two men using Angela as an element of their new hit single without even caring about her input or opinion. It's basically saying, aha, it funny when women be ignored while the bros stand there shaking their hands while she scream because she don't want this. It's so funny. Do you get it? Also, a quick honorable mention to that scene where Toby, you know, that producer who is from Texas or some shit, brings a dog to the recording studio and the black guy playing guitar gets bitten by the dog. How funny was that, guys? The only black guy that isn't part of C&T's band, as in the duo, gets bitten by a dog like in the South. Isn't that hilarious? Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, we need better representation than what this show presents us with. We, the people of the spectrum, may be few in the overall population of the planet, but that doesn't mean you get to write us out of the picture. We exist in every corner of this planet and universe. You cannot ignore our existence in the same way racists try to ignore black people, and in the same vein that Nazis try to purify the world of Jewish people. We will forever exist and always have existed on this planet called Earth. We are an inevitable fact of life, so please show us more. We aren't a rarity to be seen. We are as common as any other person on the planet, just a little different is all. What I'm trying to say is that the main focus of my rebuttal is to debunk and call bullshit on this atrocity to transgender representation. Dahlia is not a character to look up to. She is a character to shame the writers for creating, and review the mistakes on so that real representation might occur in the future. This is Carla, and she's done with this shit. Thank you for your time.